Can real estate investing actually be passive? A lot of people chase passive income when they're building their rental portfolio. Truth is that sometimes real estate investing doesn't really feel so passive. Over the past 7 years, I've built a portfolio from 0 to 40 units, and as much as I've tried to make it passive, sometimes it doesn't feel so passive. And today we're going to talk about the process, the mechanics, and the philosophies behind making your real estate portfolio as passive as possible. I'm Rob Abasolo, the co-host of the BiggerPockets Real Estate Podcast, and I'm joined here today by my good friend, Zach Lemaster, the CEO of Rent to Retirement. How you doing, Zach?
Rob, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. We've all been there where we've been swinging the hammer too much and just not loving real estate. So I think this is a very relevant topic to talk about how we can all benefit from making our portfolios more passive.
And by the way, before you even get to buying a property, you're going to need a lender. And whether you're starting or you're in full swing of your investment journey, you need a great lender who knows your market and your investing goals. With BiggerPockets Lender Finder, you can find and compare investor-friendly lenders to get the best funding for your strategy. It's fast, it's free, and it's easy to use. So be sure to visit biggerpockets.com/lenderfinder to find a lender now. You'll get connected with the lender in our network that'll take good care of you. And with that, let's get into what passive income really means. What does it mean, Zach?
When I think about passive real estate, Rob, because you're familiar with this as well as many of us are learning to invest in real estate from the beginning. There's a big pitch out there, a big draw to mailbox money, as you said, where you own rental real estate and you just receive a monthly check and that's all you do. And then you can have financial freedom and retire early, right? But the reality is, at least in my opinion, to some degree, I kind of think there is no such thing as truly passive income. And I would argue that because I think that you always need to be managing your money, managing your property manager, no matter what area you're investing in. But when I think about passive income, we try to set up our real estate as a business. And I think that's really important to approach it like building a business. As much as you can systematize things and create procedures and hiring the right staffing to manage that portfolio. Now, maybe not right out of the gates, but eventually when you do that, you can really set up a portfolio where it's automated, and that allows you to spend the time how you want to and use best utilization of what your time is best spent on. So that's what passive income means to us. And I mean, what's your thoughts in the short-term space?
I think first and foremost, the idea that you buy something and then you get money every month, like that's a very nice dream. But the truth with any income source is that it's a very, very, very active effort to even just set up an income source to be semi-passive, right? So in the short-term rental space, if you want to go truly passive, like the most passive possible, we're talking about hiring a property manager and they sort of do everything for you. But as you mentioned, and I think that this is like the big sticking point, is that you still have to manage your property managers and make sure that they're actually keeping up on bookings, that they're not pricing your property too low, that the photographs are good, that they're not just accepting any kind of guests, right? And so if you're the kind of investor that doesn't care, then you absolutely can make that passive. You're just not going to make as much money. So if you are driven to make more money, ultimately any passive income stream that you have is not going to be that passive because you're always going to be micromanaging to some degree, in my opinion anyway.
And no one's going to care as much as you do. No one's going to look after your property like you will and monitor the details of it. But I think the goal of today's show is to give some key nuggets for people that want to be a little bit more passive. I mean, Rob, do you have any key nuggets knowledge to share with the audience?
Definitely. So I would say this. I would, if you're ever going to be looking at the short-term rental side of things and you're looking at self-managing, I think you can make it semi-passive. And what I mean by this is that you can sort of alleviate a lot of the heavy lifting through building the right teams and automations. These are the two biggest components of running any short-term rental, and probably you can argue that for long-term rentals as well. But automations are a really, really, really big one. The big thing with Airbnbs, when you think about them, is you're going to be dealing with guests, right? On any given month, you're talking about dealing with 5 to 7 sets of guests. So that's a lot of messages that are coming into your system that you're having to respond to. The first thing I ever did when I was implementing automations in my business is I had an automated messaging tool that basically would respond on my behalf. And when someone booked a reservation, they got an automated message sent to them that I wrote. When someone was checking in, they get a message that sends them check-in instructions. The day before they check out, I send them checkout instructions. And then a couple days after they leave, I send them an automated message that says, hey, I hope you enjoyed your stay. Please leave me a 5-star review. This alone has cut out hundreds of messages every single month for me. Thousands, tens of thousands of messages over the course of 7 years of short-term rental hosting. And so just that simple automation right there has alleviated like 60% of the job. But the thing is, even when you have automations, you have to remember that real estate, specifically short-term rentals, it's a hospitality business, so it will still require a human touch,
Yeah, those are key. And it's cool to see what AI is doing over time. Anytime you can automate things, I think the point you made about asking for 5-star reviews, that's huge, right? Because that drives your business. And I always tell our team too, on like with our short-term rentals, if you want, and with our business, if you want 5-star reviews, you have to ask specifically for 5-star reviews, and automating that is key. So, with rent to retirement, we work with a lot of newer investors. We're in the turnkey space, helping people buy turnkey properties. A lot of with the newer, and this appeals a lot to, I think, newer investors. And some of the things that we go through with them is really understanding, okay, like what is passive, because that is a broad spectrum. It's, I think, one of the most, for SEO purposes, it's one of the most Googled terms in general is passive investing. But what is passive? How does that fit within your goals? What type of investor do you want to be? What type of passive options are there out there? And then how do you vet the right people to work with to make sure that because when you're investing in passive real estate, I think it's a spectrum, right? Is the more passive you are, the less control you have, especially on the very end of things, like in a syndication or REIT, like you're giving money to someone you have no control, versus if you're self-managing, you have the most control and it's the least passive. So like, where do you fit on that spectrum, and how do you find the people that is important to work with, that are going to meet with your goals? So I have my opinion on vetting the right people. Rob, you're obviously running your own business, but you have a lot of partners that you work with. I mean, do you have some key points on like how to find the right passive options and how to vet partners that you work with as you try to systematize your business?
Totally right. So I think when you're trying to achieve this idea of passive, right? And like I said, I think short-term rentals are always going to be semi-passive if you're self-managing. I call them the Airbnb Avengers. They're your pseudo property managers, right? So your Airbnb Avengers are going to be like your cleaners, your handymen, your landscapers, your pest control, your pool maintenance people. You're not going to do all that, right? We're trying to make it passive. So I think the question that people always have to ask themselves in regards to like building that team is who, not how. Not how am I going to mow that yard? Who is going to mow that yard for me, right? And so you have to ask yourself that question for every stage of the short-term rental or long-term rental journey. Like, who's going to do this thing? And the answer should never be you.
I always think about it of buying your way out of, whatever you're doing. And it's okay to, I think, start with, this isn't right for everyone depending on your goals, but if you're starting to like rehab properties or manage your own properties, like that's great to do. But at some point, you're going to be limited to scale. And so I would encourage everyone, whether you want to be someone that wants to be in there swinging the hammer hands on, like this is an important topic to cover, because as you grow your business, your real estate portfolio, you do need to become more passive over time and buy your time back. That's kind of the ultimate goal. And you can do that by learning the process and then replacing yourself. And you constantly replace yourself. And I've gone through that just like in growing our own business. I used to be the one, same thing, sending the emails and talking with everyone and doing all the property management it was crazy. But then you buy your way out of that, right? So
this is sort of like, if you can think of it as like a slider, right? Like a slider that you can move. When you're getting into real estate investing, it's like cash is one end and then the other end is time. And that slider, when you start, is always on the cash end. And then as you scale up and as you grow your portfolio, it starts moving closer to the time side, right? And then you get to the point where you have, 10, 15, 20 units. And now time is the most important thing, because you just simply cannot give the same, attention to detail to 15 units that you could to one, right? So that's why ultimately when you go completely passive, and you're hiring, let's say, a property manager, or you're investing into syndications or REITs or anything like that, it will ultimately cost you more money to be passive. There's just no way that being passive is expensive, in my opinion. That's not a bad thing. It's just the truth. It's going to cost you more money to be passive. However, it frees up all your time, and the more you go into your journey, the more significant that becomes. Would you agree with that, or do you think being passive is not that expensive?
Well, I think it goes either way. And I think you brought up a really good point, Rob, because being hands-on and this goes into like experience level and risk as well, but being hands-on and not passive, meaning not paying other experienced professionals to help you in their certain sector, can be very expensive in a negative way, right? Like and we've all been through this, like you got to learn, but if you buy a house, this is your first rehab deal, like it may not work out to be the best deal. And unfortunately, you just want to avoid those huge pitfalls that could set you back. Like a decade, right? So this is all, I guess, if someone's thinking about investing in real estate, like where's the best place to start? Or do I want to be a passive investor or active investor? Write down your goals and really understand like where you're at. There is absolutely nothing wrong with owning rental real estate and doing it the passive way, especially if you're a beginner. You just have to learn how to vet those opportunities and people you want to work with. But that's kind of the ultimate goal. Everyone gets tired of managing properties and sometimes dealing with guests. And so I think fast tracking your success and avoiding risk may be something to think about if you're considering, jumping right into passive.
Well, so you've got a relatively, large and luxurious short-term rental. We talked about this on one of our YouTube videos in the past, and I know you've got a management team that's managing that. A lot of work goes into managing a luxury rental. I've got one in Scottsdale. It is definitely not a passive property. I've got a lot of team members that handle a lot of components of that property, but I still get the messages every day, and I still feel like I'm in the weeds on that one. Have you managed to make that one passive, or do you still have some insight into the day to day?
So we own a lot of different stuff, and I was kind of reflecting on this the other day of like, because I want that too, right? I want my business, I want all my real estate, I want to be somewhat passive because, well, we have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old, and my wife is telling me, you told me this is going to be more passive, right? In more time, so I gotta own up to that. But specifically with our short-term rental, we have made that extremely passive, where we don't really hear about any of it unless I really want to know, because our property manager, we actually partnered with them. Our property manager does an excellent job. They come from a very service-oriented background. They actually have ownership aspect of part of the properties as well, and so they're vested in it. I think my point is that any investment can be set up to be very passive. Of course, you need to have oversight over that. And make sure that you're partnering with the right people, most importantly.
Yeah, so I guess to recap here, the idea of passive is not particularly a myth, but it is one of those things where ultimately you still have to manage the passivity of it, whatever the word would be. You still have to manage passive income, and so there is still a work component to maintaining a lot of these streams. You also have to build the right team to help make any investment passive. And you also have to make sure that you're automating as much as you can throughout the process, so that not only do you have to manage the team, you don't have to manage a lot of the day-to-day. I think there's a lot of ways to make it passive. Ultimately, it's going to be up to you on how much time you want to spend in your property. But typically, I have found the more time I spend, the more money I'm going to make in that property. But it may hurt the overall portfolio because I can't focus as much. So I think it's a question that most people have to ask themselves, like, how passive do they really want it to be? I think, my opinion, later on in their journey, more passive. At the beginning, a little more hands-on.
Yeah, it's all about your goals, right? And there is nothing wrong. I think my final points or nuggets of knowledge to leave with the audience is be just really honest with yourself about what your time commitment is, what your experience level is, what your risk tolerance is, and what type of investing appeals to you. There's always going to be naysayers no matter what direction you go. There's a lot of people that tell you have to, start by rehabbing or burring your first property or self-managing. And that's just not true, right? You can easily build a business model by partnering with the right people, but just be honest about what your time commitment is, what makes the most sense for you, and then ultimately take action. But do understand that over time, you've got to find ways to optimize your time the best. Otherwise, you just add more things to your plate and you're just pulling out your hair. Not all of us can be blessed with as abundant hair as Rob here, but it's all about systems. So
could not agree more, man. Well, hey, thanks for joining me on today's episode of BiggerPockets. And with that, Zach, where can people find out more about you? Where can they connect with you and do all that kind of good stuff on the internet?
Absolutely. If anyone wants to learn more about passive investment options or turnkey options, they can visit renttoretirement.com. That's renttoretirement.com. And we have a lot of available resources for them. So that's the place to start.
Cool. And you can find me over on the Robuilt YouTube channel, where I talk about short-term rentals, real estate, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and everything in between. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll catch you on the next episode of BiggerPockets.